Hello everybody, this is Tim. I'm here with Andrew.
Hello.
And we are going to take this old Atari 2600 and add a composite video output to it. The original Atari method of connecting to a TV was this plug here, which has a standard RCA jack on it, but it wasn't what we would consider a common connection anymore. It was an RF signal, basically the same as your coax input on a modern TV, and you would connect it with a switch box, which you would select between TV and game. I got this kit off of eBay, and this is the little tiny circuit board about the size of a postage stamp, and it has a transistor on it and a few resistors and a couple of little components, and basically we're going to tap that in onto the circuit board and then add some jacks to the back of this unit, and that'll give us the modern 2 audio and 1 video signal out, which is a common on most TVs today. Before I do that, let's talk a little bit about this particular console. This was my family's from when I was a kid, going back to probably about 1980, and this is what is now known as the Light 6, a 6-switcher. Immediately followed what's known as the Heavy 6. The only differences from what I understand is the bottom on this one is a little bit thinner and lighter than the original Heavy 6ers, which are made in California, and these Light 6ers tend to be made in the Far East, Hong Kong or whatnot. It's in great shape, other than the label on the bottom of here, which is rubbed off, but it still works. We're going to lose this long wire and add the jacks to the back. So I'm following along a guide online. I'll post a link in the description, and I'll also post a link to the eBay kit as well. I am not affiliated with either of those sites, but if you want to do this and this all works out, then you'll know how to find it for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the screws out at the back here, and we'll be right back. Alright, we had some screws to remove here. We had 4 on top. We had 2 on the bottom. I have done that, so I have not yet separated this. Let's go ahead and break apart these 2 halves. And what we have here is our circuit boards inside, and our case is now separate. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this RF wire. We're never going to need that again. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is unthread that from the case, and they gave you a little hole to thread it through, and we can toss that aside, and like I said, we won't use that again. Let's spend a couple minutes and talk about the difference between the 6 switchers and the 4 switchers. The 6 switcher was the original design, and it's actually 2 different boards. You have your slanted angle board here with the 6 switches on it, and then inside this heavy can you have the main Atari board, and that on the back has the power input and then the 2 joystick ports. On the 6 switch case, those came out straight out of the back. When they went to the 4 switch, they actually consolidated everything onto a single board that sat in at an angle. And what that did was pushed the joystick connectors up into this area here, whereas the 6 switch had it down here. If you look at a 4 switch case, you'll still see the remnants of this little panel here. They most likely used the same injection mold and just filled in that space, and then they just put new holes in on the top. Then the other difference, obviously, since it's the 6 versus 4 switches, is they, for whatever reason, removed the left and right difficulty A-B switches from the front of the panel and put those on the back panel as well. And I'm assuming that was just a cost-saving method as well. Functionally, the units work identical, play all the same games. The 4 switchers are more common. As the Atari gained popularity, they found ways to cut costs in manufacturing them and bring the cost down so more people could afford it. So we're going to go ahead and continue on, and the next thing we're going to do is remove a couple screws down here, which separates the switchboard from the main board. And they are just on either side of this tin enclosure. Now, this portion here is the RF modulator. That is what actually takes the signal from the main board, converts it to your channel 2 or 3 or 4. I think it's 3 or 4 on this unit. I'd have to look to remember. This is basically a little TV broadcaster in here, and sends it down this plug to that long wire that we already removed. My instructions now say that we need to remove this RF box entirely, and it says that we'll prevent any possible interference. Not a huge fan of removing things. I know that it's very unlikely that somebody's ever going to want RF capability back on this device. I'm going to see what I can do to just disconnect it and leave the parts in here in case something goes terribly wrong or somebody in the future wants it back as stock. We'll make sure it's reversible. Okay, so what I decided to do is just desolder these pins so that way I'm not destroying anything. And I've got my soldering iron here. I'm going to crank up the temperature just a little bit and see if I can zoom this in so you can see what I'm doing. And it's these pins right here. And let's get a little more solder. Alright, let's see what we can do here. I am not a soldering professional, so don't be too hard on me if I'm not doing this perfectly. Got a solder sucker here. Quite get it all there. Alright, see how we did. It's probably still a little bit stuck here. Well, is there something else holding that in? Well, it's hooked onto this tin can, that's why. Okay, so it looks like we have to desolder this whole tin can too. Instructions didn't tell me that since it assumed I was just going to cut it off. So let's go ahead and suck some more solder off of these joints. While I'm doing this, let's talk a little bit about the theory of what's going on. Inside the main board, they generate the signals for the TV, and they're pretty low level, and then they get sent to this board, this RF modulator board, and stepped up to a TV signal. Basically what we're going to do is tap into those same signals before the RF board, and there's a transistor on that little board that I showed, and that will step it up to a composite level video that'll fit the normal yellow connector on your TV. And a little more coaxing, and we're free. So this is our RF modulator. And again, I'll probably keep that inside the case somehow, double stick tape or something, just to keep everything together. And now it says we need to unscrew 4 screws on the back of the motherboard and remove this metal shielding. Let's go ahead and do that. We also have these 2 screws, which on the website they don't show any screws in them, but it clearly has to be removed to get this cover off, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Looks like these instructions are not 100% accurate for all machines. There we go. Set that aside. Now you can see the back of the main board. Zoom that out a little bit.
That's pretty complicated.
Beautiful 1970s circuit board technology. And we got 2 more screws which affix the main board to this can. Now, you may wonder why there's this big, heavy can inside here. That was for TV interference, or RF interference in general, but mainly for TVs. 1977, when the Atari came out, the idea of connecting a device to your TV was still pretty new. We had Pong games before that, a few other things, but it was still kind of new domains, so they wanted to cover themselves. The FCC was probably still regulating things in this new area. So they put this whole thing in a can as a shield. That started with the heavy sixer. This is the light sixer. When you got to the 4-switch version, much less shielding. And you really don't need that, but again, I like to keep my things original, so we'll put that back when we're done. Here's a circuit board. Everything that runs your Atari 2600, except for those couple of switches on the other board, is on this board right here. Takes the power in, and cartridge slot here, and one of these chips, I believe it's this one of these bigger ones. It's what they call the TIA. That was the brains of the entire unit. And what we are going to do is, it says remove the components shown below, and we have a resistor here and this little transistor up here. So I am going to go ahead and, again, I'm going to try to keep this reasonably stock. I'm going to go ahead and remove this resistor here by desoldering one pin and lifting it out, and I'll keep the resistor on the board. Let's go ahead and trace this around the back. Looks like it's right here. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. I'm going to go ahead and desolder that leg right now. Alright, let's see if we can lift that out. Switch over to my other side of the screwdriver. There you go. And alright, well, I kind of cracked the resistor.
Oh jeez.
That kind of defeated the purpose. But like I said, nobody's ever going to undo this. That's okay. Things are more delicate than I expected. So we cracked it in half, which will certainly disconnect it. How it goes. So then we got this red coil thing here, technical term. And below that is a little transistor. And looks like we are supposed to remove that. I'm going to go ahead and desolder that. Okay, let's wiggle it out, and we got the transistor out. Set it over there. Now it looks like it's time to start adding things versus subtracting. And what we have is on our board that used to have the RF modulator, we now have these holes here that correspond with these holes there. And there's 4 holes, actually there's 5 holes, and the leftmost one is ground, then we skip one, and then the third one is VCC, or voltage in, then the 4th one is video in to our new board, and the 5th one is also unused. So if we look at our new board here, the connections come in on the left, and then they're going to go out the right to our new jacks that we're going to add to the back panel. Undo these wires. So, looks like our VCC is red and our audio is green, which does not get used here. Our video out is yellow and our ground is black. So first thing I need to do is strip these wires. Got my stripping tool here. So we'll start with black, which is our ground, and it goes in this outermost hole. So we poke that in, and flip the board upside down. And got too many wires here, but go ahead and heat that up. Add a small amount of solder. And we made our first connection. That looks pretty solid. I'll go back and trim that in a few minutes, but let's do our VCC wire, which was red, I believe. Yes. So we skip a hole. And we poke that into the third hole from the left. And same thing. And finally, right next to it is our video in. We'll poke that in the fourth hole from the left. And most of our board is now wired. We still have this green wire, so let's keep going. For our audio in wire, which is our remaining green one, we want to put that in this hole right here. I'm off camera. Right here. There's a hole on the main board that's not had a connection in it before. And we are going to poke that in. Looks like it's full of solder. So I'm probably going to have to heat that hole up and desolder it first. Maybe we can just heat it up. Poke it in. And poke it in. Kind of off camera here, sorry. Okay, we got it poked in. And let's let that cool down and see if we need to add any more. No, that looks pretty secure. So that's poking out the other side now. So I'm going to find that right here. And get it back on camera. And let's trim that off. Let's make sure I'm not trimming off anything I don't want to trim off though. So now we can go ahead and start laying out where we want this. The board, the little board that it came with for the composite mod has double sticky tape on it. And I believe the intention is that you stick it right here where this silver can used to be. And then these wires get chased around to the back panel. Alright, so it's time for us to start worrying about our RCA connectors, which came with the kit. You have those on camera. And there's a red, a white, and a yellow, which, as you probably know, red and white would be right and left audio, and then the yellow would be composite video. This is a mono output. There is a stereo mod for these 2600s that you can do. I'm not doing that one right now, so we're basically just going to tie the red and the white together because TVs and such expect a stereo input, and that way we'll get stereo, or we'll get two channels in, they'll be the same thing. And so the green wire is video. I went ahead and stripped these already. I'm sorry, the green wire is audio. The yellow wire is video. And you'll see I just stripped that a little bit so we can bend that over the yellow connector. The green one I stripped a little bit longer because, again, we're going to bridge the two audio channels together, and I'll just do that by having this long wire and soldering it on both the red and the yellow little bump connector, the inner connector on there. And then the ground is going to connect the shells of all three, these little ring terminals. And so I stripped that really long. And so we can solder those all together and then trim off any excess. These are going to go in the back panel, and on the inside here is where that can used to sit, and so we're going to kind of want it in the vicinity of the old RF wire hole, which is right here. And I have a scratch all here, but I started making a little dot here. And this is 40-year-old plastic, and it could be brittle. And we want a 1/4 inch hole for each of those 3 connectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure these out and try to get them in a straight line. I think about a 1/2 inch apart should be pretty good. So we can say 1.5, actually 1/2 and 1. Might actually be a little too close together. Let's say like 5/8 apart. Oops. I'll get my dot on there so I can put that down, and actually I don't have a dot on there. And you can install these however you like. The 4-switch version has this panel area here, which makes a good place for them because they don't have these connectors in. Most of the versions of the 6-switcher I've seen online are put them about where I'm putting them here. And a little dimple there, and then another 5/8 from there. This plastic is not very soft. I have to put a lot of pressure on it. I don't want to crack it. But I got my 3 dots there. I don't know if that's even visible on camera. But what I'm going to do is pull out a small drill bit. Case open. So let's start with an 1/8. And I'll probably just work my way up. Probably being overcautious, but I don't want to have a big hole in the back of here. And I think an 1/8 inch drill should do a pretty good job. We have that on camera, William?
Yeah.
We got our first hole. Let's see if I can get the second one lined up. It's a little bit low on the mark, so I'm going to try to angle it in. There we go. And finally, number 3. There we go. So that's our 1/8 inch. Alright, we just ran out of camera chip and we've replaced it now. So I was just drilling the holes at an 1/8 inch, and we got the 3 in, and now I'm switched to a 3/16 inch bit, which is about half again as much as we want to end up with. Just enlarging these holes, being cautious that we don't split the plastic by going the whole direction at once, the whole dimension at once rather. Now I'm switching to my 1/4 inch bit, which is my final size. These are designed to go in a 1/4 inch hole. 3. So, if we did this right, we should be able to take our jacks, and they actually go through from this direction. So what we need to do is unscrew jack, and you have that on camera, William? So what they look like when they're apart, you have your nut, a lock washer, the tab for the ground, and then the jack itself. So we're going to start with the left channel, which is red, and inside I'm just going to line these up so that the shell or the inner wire points down and the ground points up. Correct that. Now I'll go ahead and tighten these all with a wrench or a pliers once I get them all in. But I'm just going to go ahead and install the next 2 the exact same way. Alright, so we went ahead and got our jacks installed. Not too bad. Red, white, yellow. And then inside, this is what it looks like so far. Now we've got some wires to connect. And so I'm going to start with this long ground. And that's going to snake its way through all 3 of these on the ring side, which is going to ground it to the shell. And we have a ton of room to work here. And speaking of that, if you're going to be doing this mod yourself, I would recommend moving these all a little bit further to the right than I did, because it really got to be kind of a pain to tighten these up around this plastic post here. Now, that ground wire comes from the circuit board output, the new circuit board, and it's going to attach to all three of those rings. So, let's solder that in place. Make sure all three of these have a nice good connection to ground. Alright, so just want to make sure those connections are good and strong. It appears that they are. So we can take our snippers, snip off our excess wire. Now we're on to the audio video connections. And if you recall, we stripped this green wire a little extra long on purpose. Hopefully I can get it threaded up through. Composite inputs on TVs weren't even a thing in 1977. Nobody really connected anything to their TV before Pong, beyond an antenna. Alright, so we have our two audio jacks hooked up. Gives us the final yellow wire to the yellow jack. Interesting bit of trivia. You may have noticed that the case of these devices is quite large compared to what's actually inside. And you may also have noticed that the top of the unit, in the case of the heavy and light sixers, actually has holes in it that look a little bit like a speaker grill. That's because the original plan on these was to have internal speakers, and it would have been stereo sound. The heavy sixer, if you ever see a picture or video of a heavy sixer, they actually have little posts in here that would have held those speakers. They dropped that when they went to the light sixer, but I'm told that it was a last minute decision to feed the sound mono into the TV. There was no stereo TVs back then. Some of the relics are still in the molds, and there are ways that you can split that signal back off this board into two jacks. Maybe someday I'll do that mod. We're not going to do it right now. But I went ahead and I soldered those three jacks in. Before I go any further at all, I am going to bring this down to a TV and hook up some wires, and we're going to test everything out before we put it back together. Alright, we have everything kind of just sitting here, and we have our little living room TV here, just happened to be handy. And we're going to plug in this old composite audio video cable into our three new jacks, and those are a little tight, and we're going to cross our fingers. We are going to, I have a cartridge in here without a label. It's actually Frogger, one of my favorite carts, and cross our fingers, and we have video. So we have audio, we have volume on the, let's see, and one of the adjustments we need to do is make sure the colors look right, and that looks like we'll have to adjust that a little bit. Let's figure out our audio here. We have volume on this remote. There we go. Looks like we are not getting volume at the moment. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, figured out a little problem. And the green wire, which is our audio wire, if you remember, I heated that up and poked it through. Evidently that joint was just a little bit loose. Took it back over to the table and firmed it up. And now we have good audio. A little bit loud. Turn that down. I cranked it way up because we weren't getting any audio. I don't have even a controller on here yet. We have a blue frog. And what we need to do for that, I'll pan that over here, is there's this white wheel here. That is the chroma adjust, and Okay, pan back over to the TV. As I turn that, it changes our colors.
Now
So
we have
basically,
green frog.
we have a green frog, and we can kind of go through the whole spectrum here. I would say that's pretty close. Let's try another cart, William. How about Pac-Man? The cartridge everybody loves to hate. I actually kind of like it. It's not the real Pac-Man, but it's a fun game. And Pac-Man should be a blue background with kind of orangish brown pills that he eats. And that's not quite right. So let's try to adjust that. That's probably pretty good. The 2 player should be red. Alright, let's try Space Invaders, William. A little bit dark, I think. Alright, we're back at the table, and I'm going to go ahead and put the can back in place. Evidently easier said than done. There we go. All these extra wiring here. I think I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this board again. Get it out of the way a little bit. Grab our 2 screws for the bottom. Alright, got them all in. I got that wire snaked around that screw without screwing it up. Now we are going to realign these 2 boards again. And reconnect them. Alright, and like I said earlier, I feel a little bad on modifying such an old device, but we're really breathing new life into it. So that's going to set in about like that, and I guess it just gets held in place by the top. Before we do that, we're going to want to neaten our wiring. The kit actually came with some extra shrink wrap, which I didn't use. Maybe I should have, but plenty of room in here, it's not going to hurt anything. Turn off my soldering iron, we're done with that. Peel this double-sided tape off. It's good quality tape it comes with. And we'll stick him on right there, just as if it was original. That's about it. Alright, we tested it out again. Get paranoid. And now I am just putting some double-sided tape on this RF modulator. Again, there's plenty of room inside this case, and this is a good quality tape, 3M. So we should be able to just stick that on in here. Shouldn't go anywhere. And then I got that little transistor here. I'm just going to take a little piece of tape and let's put that in here as well. And it's going to stick the transistor to the tape. And again, this is probably me just being silly, but that way if anybody ever would want to put this back to normal, they got the pieces and they can go ahead and do that. final step is to just put the cover back on. Put these switches up. Snap that in place. And all that's remaining is to put our final screws back in, and we're all done. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.